Are we live? Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, everybody. Welcome back to this Thursday class of, the journey into Islam. Today's class, coming a couple of weeks ago, I started with a different concept, but the actual topic of this class is being Muslim, and more importantly, how to be Muslim today, like the difficulties and struggles that we're facing in the modern world, and so here we go. Bismillah. Right. The first question that then comes to mind is, what does it mean, to be Muslim? How do we do that? And so when this question came up for me, as I'm sure that it does for a lot of people that for a lot of people, that are either born Muslim or thinking about becoming Muslim, it's that there's so much that is said about what it means to be Muslim. There's so many different views, so many different angles, so many different perspectives in terms of what it really means. But there are key and crucial points that most people agree on, right? And so the concept of being Muslim, I thought that was highlighted the best, is that you have the hadith, right, of Jibreel alayhi salam, or the hadith Jibrili, where and obviously those things. But if you go into the Quran, Allah mentions, before we get to the hadith, Allah mentions the word Islam about 10 times in the Quran in different contexts, right? In some contexts, it's got to do with those who say that they follow Islam, but then they don't actually. In a few others, it's about those who really wish to follow Islam. How do they do that? And then there's an ayah where Allah says, at the end of the ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and now today we have perfected your religion for you, and we have given it the name Islam. And so we have this concept continuously that comes through the Quran and Hadith of the completing of the religion of Islam, or this completes half your deen, or that completes half your deen, right? And how these hadiths and Quranic ayahs complement each other. And so the Quranic ayah that talks about this, and the hadiths that talk about completion of the deen, what that kind of brings to mind is that the deen is then structured, Islam is then structured on the basis of revelation, right? So there's an epistemological standpoint that Muslims start on, right? Which is that we have a way of knowing what we know. What's the time now? Actually, we just started now, but we will go maybe 10 minutes over 1 o'clock, and then we can, if that's okay with everybody. The MSA told me I must do class. So we have this way of knowing what we know, which is called epistemology, right? And so it's what is the foundation of your knowledge? And as Muslims, the foundation of our knowledge is based in 3 things, right? Which is you have like your 5 senses, what you perceive with the world that surrounds you. With your taste, with your touch, with your smell, with your sight, with your hearing, and then you have your logical instrument, right? Your aql, your intellect, which allows you to deduce things that you don't necessarily have to come into contact with. And then there's a third thing, which is the revelation, right? That which is beyond what we as limited beings can come to the conclusion on. And so revelation is a very strong part of how we know what we know. And so the Quran is part of that revelation, right? It gives us certain insights or certain information that we would never have been able to come across without it, right? And so being Muslim is rooted in understanding that you have these ways of understanding the world and what's real. And so the common way that they kind of break it up, and that's why I've showed like Quran and Sunnah, is that they say, you have Quran and Sunnah. That's how Mark, I can't see the slide, Oh. No. I'm saying, I don't know if you guys can see the slides, but if you go into the YouTube, then you'll be able to see it, inshallah. But yeah, so we say that, if you stick to Quran and Sunnah, that's part of your epistemology, part of what how you know things to be true. And so to be Muslim, you really need to hold onto these things, right? So that's why I've mentioned Quran and Hadith. Now there's a Hadith that really breaks it down very nicely, of what is your religion, where Rasulullah was sitting with his companions, much like we are sitting now, as brothers in the Salah room and online as well. And he was saying that he was giving a talk, and some man walked in. Now imagine if we sitting here and we're having a conversation, and nobody knows who this guy is, he walks in and sits here with Sheikh, because everybody knows now the lecturer, right? Sits there and comes sit right up against you, and we all like looking like, who is this person? And he says, and he just starts questioning you, and this is what happens. A stranger walks in out of the desert and starts questioning the Rasulullah, and he says, what is Islam? And Rasulullah then answers him. He says, Islam is to believe and to make your shahada that Allah is one, and Rasulullah is the final messenger, to fast, to make salah, to pay zakah, and to go on hajj, right? The 5 pillars. And then the hadith, the narration continues, where he says, okay, so but then he says, you are correct, right? The stranger confirms what Rasulullah is saying, almost as if he knew already, right? Because he did. He said, it's like, yeah, you're right. Next question. And then he says to him, so tell me about Iman, tell me about belief, faith. And Rasulullah says is the 6 pillars of Iman, right? Which is to believe in Allah, to believe in the angels, to believe in the books, right? To believe in the day of judgment, to believe that good and evil comes from Allah. So again, Rasulullah recites this to him, and the stranger says again, yeah, you're right, you got it right, well done. Imagine someone's questioning the Prophet ﷺ, and he's confirming his answer. He's saying, yeah, no, I knew that already, but you also correct, right? And then the man asks him a third question, and he says, now tell me about ihsan, tell me about excellence, tell me about spiritual, like a spiritual heightening, right? Tell me about ihsan. And so Rasulullah, I don't know if everybody's heard this hadith before, but it's quite a popular hadith, where then Rasulullah says, well, ihsan is to make salah as though to pray as though you see Allah. And if you don't see him, then know that verily he sees you. And so this is a profound, and then the hadith carries context to ask, after the stranger confirms again, he carries on and asks him, okay, so tell me about the last day, the day of judgment. And then Rasulullah says, the one who is asking knows as much as the one who is asked, right? That we both, that answer is with Allah, right? But then the stranger gets up and leaves, like just as abruptly as he came, he leaves. And as he leaves, everybody, all the companions that are sitting around is shocked. They're like, what just happened? This was a strange incident. And Rasulullah says, do you know who that was? That was Jibreel, and he came to teach you your religion, right? To teach you how to be Muslim. And it's so encapsulated in these 3 things. In Islam, the actions, Iman, the beliefs, and Ihsan, the spiritual act, the spiritual thing. that which strives for greater, because you can have actions and then you make your, you make your 5 daily salahs, but then there's no extra that you want to do. All right. The excellence part is what takes you beyond the legalities. Like there's a chef in Liverpool. His name from Liverpool. His name is Ibrahim Osiefa, and he explains how you get. He has a 2-minute video where he talks about on love and law, all right? And he says law is for human beings and love is for those who go beyond the law now. Because like if you're in love with someone, if you have something that you have to do, like for example, you have a wife, you have a mother, you have a father, and your father asks you to do this thing for me, then you'll do it, right? Because he's your father or your mother, right? You do it for them. And you're obligated to assist your parents. That's an obligation now on the child. But you can go beyond that, where you can even do things that they didn't ask you to do. Like if your mother asks you to do something small, like clean your room, then you end up cleaning, then you end up cleaning the whole passage there and everything. That's extra to show that you actually care about them. All right. So that's what the understanding, the consciousness of willing to do something that's beyond the legal obligation is what love is, right? And so when we bring that into being Muslim today, and it's just the foundation, right, of understanding how to be Muslim, then the ihsan is the pinnacle goal. The relationship of love between you and Allah is the goal at the end of the day. It's not that you want to make your door because on the day of Qiyamah you're going to trade your door for Jannah. It's not that you're going to, you're going to fast because your fasting is going to take you into Jannah. No, none of that. There's a relationship between you and Allah. Jannah isn't even the goal, And so when we go into the question of what does it mean to be Muslim, we must think to ourselves like, what is the end? What is our purpose? What is the thing that we're here for, right? Because being Muslim is a way to attain something. Islam, they always say, like, when I was growing up, they always told us Islam isn't a religion, it's a way of life. Right? And I never fully comprehended that until much later, where you engage with the secular world like we do now. And the secular world tells you religion is one thing, and then in the public, you must be a different way. You must have a different set of beliefs, a different understanding of the world. You must have a different way that you engage. Right? But what you want to do in private is fine. And so we always thought like, no, but Islam it's not just what you do at home. It's how you engage in commerce. It's how you engage in studying. It's how, like, what's the purpose of us being at this campus? What's the purpose of us wanting to study the different subjects that we study, or teaching the different subjects that we're teaching, right? Different courses. And that there's a divine purpose behind the actions that you do. You weren't just created simply for play, like Allah says, right? We weren't just created for play. And so being Muslim is founded in that kind of concept of that we are living a life in a specific way, right? And so there's another hadith that then comes about that is used not very often, where Rasulullah says that Islam began as something strange and it will end and it will go back to being something strange. And so glad tidings upon the strangers. And so that when we look at being Muslim and we look at this, we find that when we try and stick, going back to the concept of your public and your private life and how it's separated, and Islam doesn't do that. We find that trying to be Muslim in every field that you find yourself in is almost like looked at strangely, If you come and the typical example, we in the Ramadan, we're in fast now, right? The month of Ramadan, and you get the odd question here and there, like, you can't even drink water. You can't even. You have to eat. You have to not eat and drink for the whole day. Can't believe it. Right? That's such a foreign concept, but it's a small thing. Now, if we go to the bigger things like belief systems or how we view the world, then we are in a place of along that spectrum of belief systems that nobody else really holds, because you get people that hold ideologies and say, okay, we share certain concepts, and so you can have like, you know, ideas that go across. But if you go even to the simple concept of human rights, and you say, what is human rights? Islamic human rights is a completely different concept to the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, right? The universal human rights that's now been prescribed by the secular world on everybody. You must stand by this, right? And you must hold fast onto this human rights. And what Allah affords people is then forced to be pushed aside. You have to now say, okay, I can't take this because this doesn't allow certain people to practice certain things. And so I have to leave that aside. And I have to take on that which is more pleasing to society. And so there's the societal peer pressure, because we now are coming with a strange, a different understanding of what should be and what shouldn't be, right? And so Rasulullah said, you know, barakah on you guys that's coming with this difficulty, because the Sahaba and the you know, the Tabi'in, the early Muslims, they had this difficulty, they had the struggle, right? When Rasulullah came with Islam, it was very similar to today, where you if you try and practice your Islam the way that it's traditionally taught, you're ostracized from society. You are cancelled, or you are, you know, pushed to the wayside. Nobody really wants to listen to you. Nobody wants to engage with you. And so that's a big problem. But we as Muslims, because of our certainty in what we are doing, we don't worry about that. If you are on the truth, regardless of how many people stand against you, then there's no fear. That's the stance of a Muslim. Because when our, you know, beloved companions of Rasulullah were standing on Badr, and there was 1,000 facing them, and they were outnumbered and outgunned. You know, they didn't have the same kind of money to buy the same kind of equipment. They didn't have any of this. But then if you go even before that, to the Muslims in Makkah, and how they were being tortured, right? There's a story of Sayyidina where when the Muslims fled to Medina in the Hijrah, one of the Muslims that was in captivity in Makkah, he escaped and he fled to Medina. And Sayyidina Umar said that when he held this man in his back, the grooves of the work were so deep that his fingers could fit inside, right? Because this was the torture, this was the that the early Muslims went through for the deen, even though it went against everything that was being taught at the time. The socio-political zeitgeist of Quraysh and Makkah and the Arab world and the world beyond, if you go into the Byzantines and the Sassanids, you know, and further on, the level of societal degradation was immense. You know, if you look into those empires and you look into the culture in Arabia even at that time, we know that the Arabs buried their girls when they were born. We know that they traded women like property. We know these things, you know, and so we know how lawless it was, and how Islam came and curbed everything and it made restrictions, and those restrictions were looked at as evil, as wrong, as, you know, oppressive. The Quraysh said that you are insulting and you are you know, denigrating our forefathers' religion. So you're being insulting and discriminatory, right? That's the claim of the Quraysh. And today we have the same issue. Today we engage with the world as Muslims. When you come and you want to talk about how Islam views certain things, even with the traditional nuances that the scholars teach us, you know, but the rights and the status of women in Islam, how that's very different from the feminist narrative, completely, and how human rights is completely different in Islam compared to the secular world, right? And so that whole concept is what makes it difficult, what estranges us from the rest of the world. We then must stand as Muslims. I mean, I was part of an organization at UCT And I said, look, you guys said that we mustn't make this anything specifically one-sided, right? So I was part of the Palestinian Solidarity Forum at UCT, and they said, you can't make it Islamic. You can't make it Islamic, right? Because there's different people here in this group. So you can't make this a Islamic movement. So I said, okay, fine, no problem. The argument was over a poster that said at the bottom, okay, and don't forget your muslahs. And so we said, no, don't make Islamic stuff here. And I thought, okay, well, maybe if that was me, maybe I said Muslim students don't forget your muslahs. Then you still, including everybody that wants to still stand for Palestine. But then you had posters that was being sent through that group saying Palestine is a LGBTQ issue and Palestine is a feminist issue. And then you say, well, Islam has different approaches to, feminism and LGBTQ. That isn't just throw them off a cliff and kill them where they stand and all of these things. It's nuanced and there's understanding in it. But because it's opposing the norm, it's mocked, ridiculed, cast aside. Right? That if you understand as a Muslim and you want to practice as a Muslim and you want to treat someone that wants to be in whichever camp they want to be in with the dignity that Allah affords them, but still disagree with the life choice or practice that they want to practice, then you are ostracized and you are being discriminatory and you are being this and that. Right? If you look at the time of Rasulullah again, he had an agreement with the Quraysh, right? The Treaty of Hudaybiyah that said, look, we're going to come and perform Hajj 3 days, and then we're going to leave Makkah, right? We're going to do that for 10 years. They had that treaty. And so there was Muslims that went for Hajj where there was idols around the Kaaba. And the Quraysh couldn't stand it because the Muslims weren't saying, Muslims were preaching out against it and saying, this is actually wrong. But we're going to make our thing and we're going to say, this is our point of view. And then you come with yours. And when we look at how that reactive, that defensiveness, that aggressive defensivity, like if you look at how aggressive that reaction is, then we see that there's a fragility in the ideology. So there's a great philosopher in Indonesia. His name is Naqib al-Attas. I said Naqib al-Attas. And he wrote in the 70s, he did a speech on this where he talks about how secularism, the essence of whatever on the whole political spectrum that we have now, it all stems from secularism. And he said that stems from Christianity. Right now, we're not bashing our Christian brothers and sisters, in any way, but he points out that, if you look at the history, the reaction from the Christian world, the Christian European kingdoms at the time was anybody that had a different point of view to us was burnt at the stake, was tortured, was, completely oppressed, right, in the European world. And so you have people that, like a famous Jewish historian, I forget his name now, who talks about how the Muslim expansion into Spain saved the Jews. The golden age of the Jewish people was when they were under Muslim rule, right? Because the people before them that were Christian were persecuting them, right? There was persecution everywhere, and that Sayyidina Naqib al-Attas says that is based on the fragility of the understanding of the religion. Any opposition that is, if you have a very weak argument, if you have a very weak belief, and I challenge it, the ego wants you to fight me, right? The ego wants you to oppose me because you can't prove that I'm wrong, because your stance is weak. And so the reaction that comes from the ego is aggressive. And so you see that in action in Christian Europe. And so that spawns secularism. From that, the Enlightenment thinkers go, hang on, religion can't be in charge here because look how fragile it is. I can't handle this. And then you go further and further and you find that it's the same thing now. Muslims can say something that is within the tradition of Islam, we can say it. And then the other side wants to tell you, you are evil and you are this, and they want to verbally assault you, and they, that's a problem, right? And so glad tidings to us, from Rasulullah to the strangers that now stand against the opposition and aren't afraid, even though they're going to say whatever they're going to say and they're going to do whatever they're going to do, I think that I must stop there because we're taking up a lot of time. But it's every Thursday, just before the I ran a little bit late. My car got stuck just outside CPT. So just forgive me. I ask Mark from everybody. Whatever makes sense, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever, is wrong and you guys want to tell me I'm wrong and that's from me, so you can challenge me, no problem. Right. So Alhamdulillah, shukran to everybody for listening and everybody online. This is on the MSA YouTube, so you can go and check that out. But yeah, we can commence with the word, man, for keeping everybody. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah.